upcoming court hearings for a drug charge, the paperwork of which, once it made its way off the island and through the legal system, would eventually be flagged as a parole violation that would send him right back to federal prison in San Quentin, a chain of events Buck would do anything to avoid. And so, armed with a library card and a scheme, Buck set off to work to repair the Margaret as quickly and cheaply as possible, though having only had experience building houseboats with his father some many years earlier, to say Buck would even qualify as an amateur yachtsman would be a huge overstatement, which leads us briefly back to the fiberglass.
You know, yeah, I would say how many things you can do with a library card. Like like a library card in a dream should be a song because that's literally all you need.
I'm not gonna disagree.
Unfortunately, Buck didn't have a buck, so
This episode is brought to you by your local library. Are you on the run?
because you can sleep in the parking lot.
Sure. See, while fiberglass stays firm in its shape and structure, making it an excellent shell for boats, wood, on the other hand, tends to expand and contract vigorously as it rides through environmental fluctuations such as heat, humidity, and constant exposure to water and sun. Furthermore, wooden planks creak and slide as they shift and settle, naturally adapting to the hostile waves in the open sea. This is a huge
Yeah.
incompatibility here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's
This
crazy
will
how many
be
boats back in the
relevant.
day were made of wood, and I guess that's just the only thing they had, and they weren't
Well,
treated, so they had to figure out ways to make boats work, even if they expanded and contracted. So it's amazing boats just didn't sink more.
well, they had pitch and they had tar and they had all different sorts of
Yeah,
oils and ways of like aging and treating and curing wood for ships, like specifically
for
for
sure.
ships. And they used when I mentioned the fact that the planks kind of slide and creak and go back and forth, that's one of the reasons why on wooden ships you don't really see them, especially like the old wooden ships, the ones that had been used for thousands of years before
Hmm.
the 1950s when fiberglass hulls were invented or became popular. Um, they use like pitch and tar for patching between those
Yeah, yeah,
because that was flexible and it
yep.
also changed consistency with the temperatures the same way the
Mm.
wood would, right? So, but when you introduce something that is going to be expanding and contracting and shifting and moving, and you infuse it with something that is rigid and hard and never changes, more or less, that's going to create issues immediately.
Yeah.
Materials are so important when it comes to living that yacht lifestyle. Jesus Christ, I learned way too much about material science and boating
That's
doing this.
important. Also, welcome to relationship advice from Black Cat Report. If you're too rigid and stiff and can't bend, you're gonna have issues.
Keep it sticky between the cracks, y'all. Now, you
Exactly.
see,
Don't have issues then.
like I was saying, so as fiberglass hulls were a relatively new trend for sailboats at this time in the early 70s, knowledge of this incompatibility was kind of in the no man's land of common sense, being well understood in the boating community, but not yet widely written about in the library books Buck and Stephanie had been rushing through to study.
Yeah, it's always
Publishing
behind.
didn't exactly
Yeah.
happen as quick back then, and I don't know how much the Honolulu like library was getting in fresh shipments from the mainland back then, you know?
Hmm.
Well, as such, when Buck began repairs, he started by patching fiberglass cracks in the hull of the Margaret. This means he was essentially patching patches. But This was par for the course, along with a literal boatload of other mistakes and quick fixes, including when he created a homemade mast by tying together three 40-foot long 2x6s, then bolting them under the deck, all while following a DIY book on how to brace the mast and additional sails around the already duct taped boat exterior. This is the most rinky dink looking ship you can imagine.
Yeah. I want to imagine that
It's
thing
so
busts
bad.
off eventually. But
You remember from episode, what would it be, 131? We talked about Palmyra Atoll specifically,
mhm.
right?
Very windy,
Um,
stormy.
uh, how unbelievably difficult it is, even for the most sea, hardened
Skilled
veterans,
sailor. Skilled sailor,
skilled
yeah.
sailors, and folks to like damn near impossible for them to even get near, get
Mhm.
into. It's a huge pain in the ass. Um,
Yeah.
notorious, notorious the world over, right?
Mhm.
And as you can tell from the title of this series, that's where they're going to be sailing to. So keep this in mind.
Mhm.
Well,
They'll pay a toll, I imagine.
long of a short of it, I can literally just hear this boat as I'm reading through the descriptions in the book, just saying, "Kill me, kill me."
Put me out of
Oh,
my misery.
this boat doesn't want to live.
Mhm. It's an
Well,
old grandma with, like, smoker's cough, for 80 years, 90 years, and she's like, "Just kill me."
dude. Well, in truth, the only forces more powerful than Buck's ego and inexperience were reality and luck, which teamed up and delivered a rude awakening soon after he, quote, completed the Margaret just 4 months after its purchase. Another red flag there.
Mhm.
It was on April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1974, when locals, shocked and skeptical, gathered around the dock to watch the intended launching of Buck and Stephanie's boat. An event that honestly was more of a spectacle than a celebration, a sentiment perfectly summed up in the words of a salty old man, Charlie, who, when the process began, was overheard saying, quote, "Never thought I'd see the day this old gal went back in the water," end
That
quote.
guy knows what's happening too. He's just like, "That thing is gonna sink, though."
And the book brings up a good point, which this is a major bay or like harbor in Hawaii.
Mhm.
Boat launchings were happening every 5 seconds. This was like, that's normal.
Yeah.
That's just normal. This specific boat, locals gathered around like, oh
Yeah.
shit, what is about to happen with this
You
thing?
know that there's
That's
just a
how
bunch of
notorious this
kids.
is.
There's
Oh,
a
dude.
bunch of kids just, like, watching us be like, "That thing's gonna sink. Hey, what you doing there, mister?" Like, just I don't know why they had, like,
You
a
got
old
a
New
death
Jersey
wish,
old
mister?
boys. "Yeah, you
Yeah.
got a death
Yeah.
wish? You gonna die out there, mister." Like, just all these crazy kids just tell him, "You
I'll
suck."
put 10 on
Like,
2 days.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're betting. Those, like,
They
gangster kids are betting from, like, New York. I it's That's just how I envision it.
stopped their marbles game to bet on this boat.
Mhm.
Um, well,
Shoots and ladders.
people were in disbelief on so many levels, partially because anyone was going to attempt to sail the ocean with this notoriously unreliable ship, but also that the people who were going to sail the ship decided to flagrantly break a well known superstition when they renamed the boat from the Margaret to the Iola, an action seen as a direct assault against luck and known the world over as a bad idea.
Never
Sailing
rename.
is one of those industries that is so ripe with superstition, which, when you picture the kind of shit sailors go through and how much they're praying more to their boat than they are to
Mhm.
God in these
Yeah, there.
situations. There's a
Mhm.
lot of superstition wrapped up around this, and one that it crosses cultures, crosses times, crosses
Mhm.
everything, is you never ever rename your boat ever. Whatever
Mhm.
its name is,
All the
that's what
same
it
name.
stays.
Mhm.
But they were hippies. Well, Stephanie was, and after a long night of drinking and smoking pot, she suggested that they renamed it the Iola, which in Hawaiian means to life. It's just
No, no,
yeah, I know.
no. Never say that on. Never say that as a boat, and never say as a person. First off, to life, because you immediately die afterwards. I think that that's the whole thing. Is that you immediately die,
Horrible,
and
horrible idea.
then you're like, hey, let's do something against the most. Let's do something against the most unpredictable thing we can go in besides space. If we want to compare space and the ocean, is very similar in that there's super unpredictable things can happen. Uh, yeah, let's say that to life, cheersing to that, and then your boat
Smile.
capsizes in a hurricane. That's kind of how it
We'll get
happens.
we'll get more into this in well, we'll get into this entirely in part 2, but even the dogs, or at least one of the dogs, was like only trained in Hawaiian for commands.
Hmm.
And I want to point out these are two like of the most European looking motherfuckers you can imagine, like, strawberry blonde hair, light brown hair,
Hmm.
constant sunburn, um and just being like, Paco, Paco, oh my god, Malay, Malay, Paco, Malay. just scream. Just,
Yeah, it's just like, please stop saying that.
they are the hippies that you're picturing right now. Well,
Yeah.
as I said, this was a bad idea, renaming the ship, a bad idea that would soon manifest in the form of a very rookie mistake. Buck had secured the Iola to a boat winch with nylon rope, which, at the moment of the big launch, quickly led to a dark comedy catastrophe. As spectators looked on, Stephanie stood on the Iola's deck, proud, holding a huge bottle of champagne ready to christen the ship, just beaming with joy, while Buck and that random salty old man Charlie slowly cranked and lowered the Iola off her trailer and down a boat ramp. It was a tedious process for a 30-foot wooden yacht involving placement of boards for support and precise adjustments to ropes and pulleys to carefully and slowly, lower this and raise that. A
Hmm.
lot of terms which, because I live in the mountains, I don't care enough to study. Nevertheless,
Yeah.
while Charlie worked the winch and Buck ran around making checks and changes, the nylon rope attached to one side of the ship suddenly stretched like a rubber band, causing the Iola to fall on its side and sending Stephanie through the air and into Buck's arms, which
Oh,
wouldn't have been a big deal if not for the fact that during the process, the boat landed directly on two steel beams, critically puncturing its already multi patched hull.
dude,
they, they can't even
check
get it in the fucking water.
check your tension. When you're using rope, when you're using any kind of thing to haul something, check how much the tension can pull it before you do this. And don't use
Well, you
nylon
would
rope for
use
something super heavy, honestly.
Well, for this specific situation, there's a reason why if you go to harbors and you see those large ships and stuff, that
Hmm.
are kind of like, they're on those giant cables that are coming down from the ships and they're set up there.
Yeah.
You only use stuff that doesn't stretch, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to stretch and start
Hmm.
pulling and rocking because guess what? It's
Yeah.
sitting in the water. It's just going to be
Yeah.
stretching and rocking. You need it to be taut or snap,
Even.
one of the
Yep.
two, right?
Hmm.
Well, again, a lot of material information, but this is based around islands and boats, so I'm sorry, I got to give you all the little backstory on it, but
Hmm.
I think I've made my case about where Stephanie and Buck are at as boaters.
Yep. They're
So
really bad. So they're really bad and they are novice. And so it's going to be fun watching them
yes, it's
sail.
gonna be a blast.
Hmm.
Well, seeing what had happened, Buck proceeded to flip the buck out on poor little old Charlie, screaming in his
Oh.
face and squaring up to fight him. While in the background, hippie Jennifer tried to calm him down, saying it wasn't that big of a deal and probably dropping lines like, it's what the universe wanted, etc. Well,
Hmm.
this one sided screaming match continued on for a moment until Buck finally got into their car and sped off, leaving Stephanie standing on the dock, still holding an unopened bottle of champagne in front of a crowd of onlookers.
Oh, Stephanie. Nah, it make me feel bad for Stephanie.
Now, and I don't know if this is really legal for me to do. I might cut this out later. Um, but I did get the full list of names, the names of the onlookers that were there. And a few of the names sounded really familiar. They were Bud, Tom, Thomas, Little Mystery, Bob, Betsabe, Lucas, Tim, D, Max, Ian, Morgan, Dragon Ball, Tim Miller, Marissa, Gavin, Rochelle, Ave, Jaden, Jackie, Yellow Bear, Dwayne, aka Snatch Twat, Alyssa, Bree, Michael Extreme, Kristen from the Paranorm Girl podcast, James, and most shocked of all, our sexiest producer, Happy Kitty.
And
I
happy
don't know if I can include that. Yeah,
belated
happy birthday.
birthday. Yeah.
Love you, Copy
Woo.
Kitty.
Yeah. Thank you all for on looking on this boat episode. Because
Yes.
yeah.
Now listen, y'all, your secret's safe with us. We won't tell anyone you were there when this crime went down or that you're all beloved members of the Black
Mm-hmm.
Cat Report Patreon. But moving on, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
I do picture Charlie there when all this went down, just in the background, just being like, I should have never, I should have never left the ice wall. Just
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was there. Charlie. I mean, Charlie's always on the
Charlie.
boat. So I just picture this older guy kind
It's
of
got
with
to be a
like,
Charlie.
he's got to be a Charlie everywhere you go. He just has a tank top, with like some like surf company on it,
They called
some
him
board
Red Face
shorts.
Charlie.
Yeah, yeah. And he's just probably putting down a pint of schnapps every other day, probably every day. Just like, damn, I'm getting too old for this. If I had my life
I'm
all
getting
again, I would do it again, actually.
a vampire. I'm getting too young for this.
Mm-hmm. Charlie is a vampire.
Well, meanwhile, in San Francisco, some 2,000 miles away, Mac and Muff Graham were in their final weeks of preparation for an extended trip through the Pacific. Their ship, the Sea Wind, was everything the Iola wasn't, and its captain, Mac, was everything Buck wasn't. A competent sailor who had left his life as an engineer to travel the world, Mac had been sailing since before he was able to walk. It was a multi generational passion, and his family, one he took very seriously, and for those that knew him, all would agree he was made for. It had been 14 years since Mac had bought the Sea Wind, and in that time, he had carefully and painstakingly replaced or customized every single inch of the stunning, all wood, 38-foot yacht. Eh? Of the stunning, all wood, 38-foot long yacht. To say the Sea Wind was an instant celebrity in any harbor it pulled into would be an understatement. Fitted with only top of the line equipment and maintained with the most high quality of materials, many would assume it was owned by a millionaire, though that couldn't be farther from the truth. In reality, Mack had worked his way up to becoming an engineer at General Motors by the time he was 28, but had been miserable and desperately trying to get away from corporate life since the day he had first stepped into the office. As fate would have it, his uncle, whom he was very close to, passed away and left him with an inheritance of $100,000. Not a small sum, but not enough to retire on either.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 28-year-old Mac methodically moved this money into secure investments and was able to make a small financial safety net that enabled him to quit his corporate job and begin what would become a multi year long search for the perfect sailboat.
Hmm.
A quest that ended with the $20,000 purchase of the Sea Wind. During
Yachts.
yes. During this time, and ever since, whenever the fiscally cautious Mac deemed it necessary, he would work odd jobs in harbors where he would quickly be hired and then often promoted up through any number of sailboat related businesses. This scenario would play out regularly, even though it was always well understood by his employer that his stay would be temporary. Simply put, boat shop owners loved Mac, not
Mm-hmm.
just for his reliability and incredible work ethic, but his unmatched skills and talents when it came to building and maintaining sailboats. These jaunts into regular employment enabled Mac to gain access to professional equipment, discounts on gear, and connections for deals, the benefits of which he would lovingly put back into the remodeling and maintenance of the Sea Wind. So, while the Sea Wind could proudly stand next to a millionaire's yacht, in truth, it was the gem of a working man's dreams and decades of dedication.
Mm.
Like, this guy put everything into it.
Yeah, do what you love, and for all of you out there, if you're working corporate jobs, get through it. Find something you love. Dedicate time into it, even when you're working on your corporate job. Dedicate time into it, like this guy, and he found a way to get to it. And that's amazing. I imagine that him working at yeah, very seaworthy places, docks and stuff like that. They probably don't care if like you're gone in 2 months because that's kind of just the life, you know.
It,
Uh
I mean,
if you're like a
this
sea
would be
hand.
this would be like shipbuilding places, ship repair places for
Mm,
like millionaires' yachts. And even though he'd be like, well, I only plan to be here for 4 to 6 months, they'd be like, hey, we've seen what you can do in a week. We want to
mhm.
make you manager. Like it was like,
Oh yeah.
like he was taking titles everywhere he went, moving up because they were like, look, dude, even if you're just here for a little while, we're going to learn so much from you
Mhm.
that it's worth the fact that we're going to have to retrain somebody. Like he
Yeah.
wasn't just coming in, he was coming in as like a day laborer or a grunt, and within a week or a month, getting hired into management.
Yeah.
Like
That's cool.
the dude was a badass. He knew
Yeah.
exactly what he was doing. Right.
Mhm.
Well, this passion was something that Mac's wife, whom he lovingly called Muff, short for Muffin, was all
Oh.
too aware of when she married Mac. By 1974, the two of them had been married for 13 years and, by all accounts, were still madly in love with one another. They had
Mm.
traveled the world multiple times, fought off pirates, braved storms
Hell
that
yeah.
swallowed ships twice their size, and, as a result, became the perfect sailing crew with unrivaled chemistry.
Hell
Veterans
yeah.
who were battle hardened by adventures on the open sea. This was a power couple, like a
Yeah.
100%. This couple was a
Yeah.
badass, right?
They experienced a lot, so that makes great teamwork. Eventually you just figure out how to work a boat together, and that's awesome. And they fought off freaking pirates.
I think yeah, like through the Mediterranean, like multiple times. Like there was like stories about them in the Red Sea, them
Mhm.
throughout the Mediterranean, through like our travels through the Orient. Like it was just like there could be a movie series just made off of this couple just traveling. Like they did so much crazy
Heck
shit. I
yeah.
think they're I didn't include it, but their initial honeymoon was like a 6-year cruise, like or
Oh,
sailboat trip,
dang, that's
which
cool
was
though.
that's
Yeah,
longer than most modern folks' marriages. Like it's
that's
like
true. Yeah, a 6-year honeymoon across the world. I mean, it's definitely a specific type of person's life. Like,
yeah.
you have to love being on the sea. You have to love the idea of it because you're just out there all the time, and you're like, where are you in dry dock? Just maybe to fix a few holes every once in a while, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, even still, as the years passed, Muff began to occasionally express a desire to settle down. She sometimes wished that they would chill on all these world travels and
Mhm.
just maybe pleasure sail, like so many others that they would meet as they would go to these harbors and make friends with new people. But it was a dream that she learned to deny when she saw the look in Mac's eyes, her beloved husband deep in his element. She had to accept that the very reason she loved him so much came from the passion still burning from Mac's first marriage, the sea, sailing, and the sea wind.
That's very appreciative and beautiful, honestly, that
Yeah.
she saw that. And it sucks, that that sucks in a way. But it is
Yeah.
beautiful to appreciate that of like, well, if I change that about that person, in either side of it is that like, oh, then I
This is
would
what I loved
that
about them.
it wouldn't be the same person. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well,
Muffin just wanted to proof. A little Baker joke, if you guys know what I mean.
There was some cute lines too of like them talking because she was always insecure. You know, when they met, she was like
Mm,
young in her 20s. Um, she was like fucking like hourglass figure, constantly used to being hit on by fucking everybody. And she was, I think it was in San Diego or San Francisco, but her car broke down one night, and of course, Mac showed up. He had been walking through like downtown and was like, "Oh, you got car troubles." Went, pushed her car, got her car started, like literally just magically from scratch. Like I'm sure he took like some
mhm.
paper clips and a pencil. The dude is a mechanical genius, right?
He's an engineer from GM, so yeah,
Yeah.
he probably knows exactly what's going on.
And he became like a mid-level engineer after graduating college. So in like 4 years, he was already like a mid-level engineer at
Yeah,
General Motors. And this
pretty
is like
good.
that close to the like around heyday time of General Motors. So like
Mhm.
that's fucking impressive, you know.
Yeah.
But anyways, Max showed up. He was only a couple of years older than her. Got the car started, and asked, he's like, "Hey, well, would you like to go get a drink?" She was so close to saying no. Like she was
Mm.
because she had got hit on so fucking much.
Yeah, for sure.
But there was that spark, and she's like, "Yeah, you know what? I will. I'll go get a drink with you as a thank you for fixing my
Mhm.
car."
Yeah, yeah.
We're like, da 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 da, and it was love. Just immediately, it was fucking love. They
Mm.
they hit it
Yeah.
off. So really,
So
really
cute.
fucking cute couple. And like even over the years, like I was saying, she got self conscious, and so she was always into like uh these different fad diets and stuff like that. Like one that I laughed about from family history, but she got into like the apple cider vinegar craze in like the 70s of like trying to lose weight. And so Muff had a little bit of a muffin top. And Mac, even though he kind of looked like an ex-Marine, the guy was built, he'd been doing sailboats and hard labor for like over
Mhm.
however many years. I mean, to be like, "I love every curve and inch and swerve of you, baby.
Aw.
You're my dream come true." And she'd be like,
They got
but it's
comfy.
all right. They were so
You know,
cute,
that's so
dude. They're
beautiful.
so
Yeah, they got
cute.
comfy, and that's so
Yeah,
beautiful.
really fucking cute couple. Well,
Love with Black Cat Report.
oh,
Mhm. And then they were fucking murdered.
there's gonna be a lot of people in this story, so
Yeah.
this is why we're getting all that. We're getting the intro
We're
episodes,
getting
right?
the goodness, yeah.
Well, in 4 weeks, Mac and Muff would be leaving San Diego and heading to Hawaii, where they would stay for a month before sailing off to an obscure, uninhabited island, Palmyra Atoll.
Mhm.
Once there, they planned to explore the island and live in the tropical paradise for somewhere upwards of 7 months. So they were going to go there and basically set up a temporary home.
Yeah.
It was a dream Mac had cooked up in his never ending quest for adventures. He had meticulously researched the island and prepared for the trip with the same cautious intensity that so hallmarked every major move in his life. During which time, he had hunted down and interviewed the rare few who had been to Palmyra, such as World War II veteran Al Horton, who was stationed there from 1942 to 1944. Folks that listen to
Hmm.
episode 131 might remember this. Well, Mac and Muff had dinner with Hal shortly before their departure from San Diego. He had a lot to say about the island, most critically, how to safely navigate into Palmyra through its notoriously narrow coral reef channel. Most ominously, and much to the fears of Muff, Hal shared other, more disturbing memories from his time spent on Palmyra. Quote, "Once one of our patrol planes went down near the island. We searched and searched, but didn't find so much as a bolt or piece of metal. It was weird, like they dropped off the edge of the earth. Another time, a plane took off from the runway, climbed to a couple hundred feet, and turned in the wrong direction. They were supposed to go north, and they went south instead. It was broad daylight. We could never figure it out. There were 2 men aboard that plane. We never saw them again. We had some very bad luck on that island.
Mhm.
Old salts in the Pacific called it the Palmyra curse."
Hmm. And that was just
The
Tuesday.
island is very small. You could fly over at 10,000 feet and not see it if there were a few clouds in the sky. I'm going to reread that again. The island was very small. You could fly over it at 10,000 feet and not see it if there were a few clouds in the sky. Once we were at a plane overhead trying to find us, but he crashed in the drink before we could find. Once we heard a plane overhead trying to find us, but he crashed in the drink before he could find the runway. We didn't get to the poor guy fast enough. Sharks found him first. End quote.
Wait a minute, is that Charlie? Oh, give me some
like,
snaps. Peppermint
like they fell
snaps.
off the edge of
They
the
fell off
earth.
the earth. Wait a second. That's Charlie. Yeah. Ugh.
Captain Butler? Is that you?
Captain Butler, is that you? No, it's just
Oh, I
Charlie.
miss Captain Butler. Yarr! I miss
Yeah.
Captain Butler. Such a
Mm-hmm.
character. We need to
He'll
check in
come
on
back.
him, see how he's doing.
Yeah, we'll do a revisit one day.
I heard there were sequels of the books that are supposed to be historical. I don't know how that works. Well, I guess time keeps on slipping,
History
slipping,
has
slipping into a fake
history has
future,
sequels.
apparently.
Yeah,
Yeah,
history has
yeah,
sequels. You know,
that tracks. That tracks.
yeah, with the World War One, World War Two, the sequel. That's what I believe we're gonna now refer to World War Two as the sequel.
Real quick, hold on, I gotta mark this in the Kristen in the chat. Muff, no!
Muff.
Muff.
Mm,
Her sound was too
yeah.
muffled. I didn't say Muff died. Y'all are making assumptions. Y'all are
No.
making
Well, I mean,
breakfast
the
pastry
stories we
related
usually tell is
assumptions.
like the stories we usually tell are like, look at this beautiful family or this beautiful friendship, and then it's like, and they were fucking murdered, ripped limb by limb by this
That's what
awful murderer.
that's what our sexiest producer, Copy Kitty, said that we have to do with episodes.
We always have to do. We have to, but it's beautiful sometimes just to see that how life works. One minute you could
How
be
life ends.
works and ends, yeah. Yeah.
When a minute you can be what
Alive
were you
and
gonna
well,
say?
and the next you can be dead. You can be dead. Yeah.
The next you might be in a metal box on a deserted island.
Yeah.
Well,
You never know what life brings.
meanwhile, back in Hawaii, Stephanie and Buck were sitting through fears and tensions during an awkward dinner with Stephanie's mother and brother, who, in a last ditch effort, had flown in from the mainland to try and convince her not to run away and become a fugitive.
Makes sense.
Spurred to action by a letter they had received some time earlier, Stephanie's family read through the flowery veil of hippie optimism and were planning to do whatever they could to pull her away from an obviously bad decision.
Hmm.
But the more that they talked, the more fears they found. Stephanie
Yeah.
had little to no filter and even less tact for selling their plan with any tone of common sense, saying the two were going to head off to an undisclosed deserted island, lay low for a while, then, eventually, return, at which point Buck would turn himself in, and the judge would be so impressed by the fact that Buck hadn't caused any trouble while he was a fugitive that he would probably just let him go. You know, the old "you're pretty chill" defense. It's absolutely bulletproof.
Hmm.
They
Yeah,
won't care at
that's
all.
also if you believe it, that's also what Jesus did. He went and laid low for 3 days, and then he came back, and it's like, I am pretty chill.
Then
You
disappeared.
all are you all are pretty chill, and then disappeared for a while.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm gonna make more random comparisons throughout these episodes that make no
to
sense.
to Buck and Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a plan as solid as their ship, and much like sorry, restart. Well, it was a plan as solid as their ship, and much like the Iola on launch day, it was at risk of being pierced by reality.
Mhm.
As it turns out, the family had only narrowly made it in time as Buck was planning to skip going to his court hearing the next day. And while they all knew Buck was going to try and run from the law eventually, what they didn't know, what they were just finding out at dinner, was that Stephanie had also been arrested as an accomplice in Buck's most recent crime.
Yeah.
The family looked on in shock as she told them how Buck was arrested for selling MDA to an undercover cop in the parking lot of a J.C. Penney, and that the police then proceeded to arrest her at a laundromat right down the street.
Mm.
She raged about how unfair it was to arrest Buck under false pretenses, that he was entrapped, and that MDA, which I'll explain in just a moment, was more like grass and not even that big of a deal.
Mhm.
Now, when you're
Cows eat
thinking
it.
of MDA, yeah, cows.
Yeah.
Now, when
Yeah.
you're thinking of MDMA or MDA, think ecstasy, or as we called it in my day, Molly, which chemically is MDMA, whereas MDA, the drug Buck was busted selling to an undercover, is chemically more like a close cousin to MDMA. Not quite as
Mhm.
popular and obscure to come across these days, but more widely known about during this very specific period of time in the 70s, right? So it was kind of a,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say an early precursor. I think it came later, but it's like really similar, really damn
I'm gonna
close,
say
right?
it's the Donnie Wahlberg
Delta
of drugs. Yeah,
or
you
the
know?
Delta 8 versus, just straight up THC, right?
I like my
Delta 9,
comparison
Delta
better.
8. Yeah, it's the Danny Wahlbergs or
The
something.
Donnie
So,
Wahlberg. The Donnie
and
Wahlberg of, he's not as cool as Mark Wahlberg.
it's like if Danny DeVito was in Rush Hour instead of Jackie Chan. That's basically what the drug is like. Well,
Mhm.
you want me to shoot somebody?
Yeah, and then I started
Yes!
blasting.
Yes, I want you to shoot! I don't
Mhm.
know.
That was a good
So
Chris Rock there.
thank
Or
you.
Chris Yeah, Chris
Yes!
Tucker, sorry. Chris Tucker,
Chris
right?
Tucker. Yeah,
Chris Tucker, yeah. Chris Tucker. Um,
we'll delete
y
that out. He will come and beat your ass.
he will. He
Well,
does do that.
so anyways, while Stephanie made her stump speech about how unfair the cops were, she also told her family how if Buck goes to court tomorrow and pleads guilty, the
Mhm.
charges against her would be dropped. Now, to make this a little more clear, all
S
Buck
Don't think that's how it
had
works.
to do was go to court, plead guilty, and leave. If he did that, he would be given a court date and released that day. Just free to go, free from all legal consequences until whenever he had to show back up. He
That's
wasn't
never
going
take the
straight to
easy way.
jail.
Yeah,
He
never take
wasn't
the
going
easy way.
straight to jail. And and his girlfriend, Stephanie, would forever be free and clear of all this. Hearing this, her brother's jaw dropped, but maintaining composure, he managed to be a good bro and offered to accompany Buck to court the next day because if he didn't go, there would be a bench warrant issued for Buck immediately, and his
Mhm.
sister might go to jail for shit she didn't do.
Yeah.
And if he did go, they would at the very, very least have more time to make their inevitable escape, right? This
Mhm.
is, hey man, how about another month or two instead of having to go on the run in 8 hours?
Yeah. I
Like you're
I
already planning on dodging this, dude.
yeah.
What the?
I
Why do
hope
you got to
that
bring? Yeah,
I hope
so
that the
fucked
big
up,
brother
dude.
was just like a big buff guy and just like was just
No,
like you're going. Oh, see, there's where.
there was 30 pages of the book talking about how he like literally was having self-deprecating moments about like, man, I'm so square, like in his life, and how he was like a Nixon kind of guy and just like very
The
conservative,
worst
very
kind. Yeah, the
Poindextery.
worst kind.
Yeah. And his sister was this like free loving hippie, right? So they could not be more
Yeah.
opposites,
Hmm?
right? But he was still looking out for his little sis. He was like, hey,
Yeah.
Yeah, so hey Buck, hey buddy, hey, I know you've only grunted during this entire dinner because that's what he did. He
Mm,
was like,
mm.
yep, and like
That's
the
what a buck
family's
would
meeting
do.
him for the first time, like,
Yeah.
so how'd you get the name Buck? "Hmm, that's cool." Like
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
awkward as. Meanwhile,
yeah.
Stephanie's like, and you would not believe, oh, what they did to him at J.C. Penney. It was just
Opposites
like,
attract. You know, we also don't
so
hear
funny.
enough good stuff about JC Penney, you know?
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, it does. JC Penney's exist. It will always
That
exist.
J.C. Penney. Oh no, Sears. Was it Sears that went under?
Sears went under. Sears and Roebuck, yeah. No, wait,
Yeah,
there's some Sears. I feel like they all went on. Every clothing company always will commit bank will like go for
Big Lots though.
bankruptcy and then they still exist. They just get bought
Big
out by
Lots is gone
somebody
now.
else. Big
Big
Lots?
Lots
Oh,
is gone.
Big Lots is completely gone. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them
Now
go
there's literally
bankrupt.
just Big Lots where they were.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
self fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this could not have been a stupider decision, is what I'm trying to really emphasize here.
Yeah.
And the fact that Buck was just gonna be like, I'm just not gonna go tomorrow. They're like, why? There's literally no consequences and only benefits, and the person you love will be free. He's like, nope. Just whatever.
I want to imagine that there's one piece of him that's like the most embarrassing part of the plot in his like thing, and he's just like,
I
I don't want
save
to go.
gems. I save gems. I
I
saved
saved gems.
gems.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's revealings of character as the series goes
Mm-hmm.
on. So, anyways, thankfully, Buck did agree and they went to court. And by the
Mm.
next evening, all was made right, kinda.
Yeah.
Well, in one last Hail Mary attempt to bring Stephanie to her senses, her mom and her brother invited her to come alone to their hotel room where, after some more pleading, her brother pulled out the big guns. Buck's rap sheet, something he'd managed to acquire after pulling some strings with old friends.
Long one, I imagine.
4 pages long. It reads like the list of crimes I've committed playing Grand Theft Auto, starting at the age of 16 years old when Buck committed Grand Theft Auto. Soon after that, he went on to commit 1 count of robbery, 2 burglaries, and another armed robbery, all by the time he was 18, the last of which landed him in San Quentin for the first time. Well, a few years later, just 7 months after he had been released on parole from that armed robbery conviction, he was arrested again for burglary. And to top it all off, only 7 years prior to this conviction, or sorry, and to top it all off, only 7 years prior to this conversation with Stephanie, he had been committed to a mental hospital for the criminally insane. And that was just page one of his rap sheet. Stephanie responded with a laundry list of prepared explanations. It was unbelievably clear that she had been preemptively warped by Buck with
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
excuses spoon fed to her slowly over the past few years that they had been together. Oh, well, it wasn't like that. It wasn't bad. And she was in
Yeah.
it, right? Her mom, when seeing how far down the road from common sense that Buck had taken her, said, quote, Sweetheart, if you go out on the ocean in that little boat, I don't think you'll ever come back. To which Stephanie replied, I love you for caring so much about me, Mom, but everything's gonna be all right.
Mm-hmm. It's like I don't even want to come back.
The next day, defeated, her family flew back to the mainland. Meanwhile, in San Diego, Muff unexpectedly knocked on the door of one of her closest friends, Marie. With bags under her eyes, she also carried a large box of personal belongings, souvenirs from her and Mac's world travels, and most disturbingly, close family heirlooms.
Hmm.
After a long, emotional conversation, Muff revealed to Marie that she was convinced something bad was going to happen and told her friend what to do with their belongings if her and Mac never returned.
Hmm.
A week later, Stephanie's mom received a letter with a decorated envelope, a cute, handmade, quote, drawing of a sailboat skimming the sea, and the words,
Aw.
"Today's cares soon vanish," end quote. And that's where we'll pick back up next week with part 2 of the Palmyra
Dang.
Atoll murders. Nuck if you buck. Joey, what are your thoughts?
Dang.
Yeah,
Oh my
good man.
God. That's leaving it open-ended for sure. If they're ready, Buck. Okay, first we're gonna go with Buck. Buck is fucked. Buck is fucked. He's honestly stupid, and I can't believe he actually went to go to the stupid court case that he had. I thought he was gonna skip it, but he's probably still gonna be on the run. Doesn't really matter. So
For folks that are still sticking around with the chaos and the goofiness, yeah, dude, more schemes, more craziness. I really wanted to save the actual sailing. That give it my evil laugh. That needs
yeah,
pages.
sailing is its
happens
own
when they
adventure.
when they hit the open seas? Let's just put it this way. We won't even mention what happened to Mac and to Muff on their way to Palmyra because everything went fine.
Yeah.
But the shit that happened to Stephanie and Buck and how much character comes out is it's fantastic. But
So I imagine
it's a great story.
that there's going to
I
be some
love
crazy
learning
stuff.
story.
Yeah, there's going to be some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And I will also regale you with tales of my own family's terrible boating experiences. And so those will be next episode, probably as they're going through their bad experiences. And I'll be able to be like, hey, I know that happened to my aunt. That happened to my mom, you know, or me.
It'll be 100% relatable, I'm sure. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can find
Yeah.
the next episode. But if you haven't, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, we're everywhere. You can get us anywhere. We literally put out a bounty that we'll send you free stickers. We might even eventually send you a free shirt. If you can find a podcast platform that we are not on, send us that platform. Either email at contact@blackcat.report or send it in DMs through Instagram. I think you can send it on Twitch or comment or YouTube.
All
We'll
the
find
places.
it every place. So also follow us at patreon.com/blackcatreport. You can find us there. You find so much cool stuff. There is so much extra stuff that we do that you might not see on your regular podcast platforms. So, and interestingly enough, tomorrow we'll be releasing of one of those cool things. Cup of Joey will be releasing tomorrow at 10 a.m. Be prepared. Surprise, tomorrow's June, and I didn't even know. So, there you go. You can also find us next week in Beer, Booze, and Boogeymen, June 7th, 6th,
Yep.
6th,
As,
June 6th.
Joey, the outro music's wrapping up. And
Yep.
I gotta get going on this next week's script. So
Ready?
we love you all. We'll
We
talk
do.
to you later and bye.
Bye.